So, what is an inoperative item on your aircraft? Well, generally speaking, the FAA defines inoperative items as systems and or components that are not functioning for their intended purpose or they're consistently not operating normally. Let's say, for example, you're taxiing out to the run up area and it's a VFR flight, and your number two comm is intermittently turning on and off. Or you go to press the button to flip the frequency, and sometimes it works, or sometimes the button sticks. Well, that would be considered inoperative. Although that item may not be part of your VFR or IFR day and night required instruments and equipment for that flight, it still requires a write up and a return to service. So you bring yourself back to the ramp, write it up, have the mechanic either repair it or remove the item and placard in the cockpit or deactivate it and put a placard in the cockpit. Either way, it still requires a return to service log to get you back in the air. Now, sometimes a pilot can perform the deactivation of the system if it's preventative maintenance. However, I wouldn't recommend this because it's not always as simple as just flipping the switch to off. There could be a reason why the system is malfunctioning and not operating properly. Could be an arcing wire behind the firewall or some other reason that we are unaware of. Sometimes there's specific deactivation procedures associated with that piece of equipment. So I would always recommend writing it up and allowing the mechanic to handle that if you're unfamiliar. Now, we all know our required instruments and equipment items listed under 91.205. We use those silly acronyms A, tomato flames, or atom squared ELF. One thing to remember, though, is those are bare minimum items for IFR and VFR flight. You may not know this, or you just may have forgotten this down the line, that 91.213 says there could be items in addition to those IFR and VFR items, and they could be listed in an aircraft equipment list and or the kinds of operations equipment list. Those lists are generally located within your pilot's operating handbook. And what those are lists of additional equipment that are associated specifically with that N registered aircraft. Now, it's important because sometimes newer or additional equipment could be tied in to the systems related to the required minimum items for IFR and VFR flight. So those also may be required items for IFR and VFR flight. You also want to make sure you're complying with your airworthiness directives because there could be equipment that's required under some of those. I always would recommend working through the mechanic to clear up any inoperative items, as that'll help ensure that you're getting yourself legal and back in the air safely.